The wind howled like a wounded beast, driving needles of ice through any exposed skin. Adam pulled his fur-lined hood tighter around his face, squinting through the near whiteout conditions. 3 years in this frozen wasteland had taught him to read the storms. This one would be bad, possibly the worst of the season. He quickened his pace, the carcass of the snow hare he'd trapped slung over his shoulder. His shelter, a crude but effective cabin built against the side of a stone outcropping, was still half a mile away. The storm was rolling in faster than he'd anticipated, and darkness would follow soon after. The wind shifted suddenly, carrying an unfamiliar sound. Adam froze, his hand instinctively moving to the knife at his belt. 3 years of exile had honed his senses to razor sharpness. That sound didn't belong to the wilderness. It was mechanical, the creak and groan of stressed metal. Curiosity warred with caution. The sensible choice was to head straight for shelter, but Adam had survived this long by investigating anomalies. Strange sounds meant change, and change, whether threat or opportunity, demanded attention. He altered his course, moving toward the sound. The snow was nearly knee-deep now, and each step was a labor. As he crested a small rise, he saw it, the remains of some kind of vehicle, half buried in snow. It resembled a cart, but constructed of materials he'd never seen before. A latticework of silvery metal in translucent blue panels, now shattered and twisted. Adam approached cautiously, knife drawn. The cart had left a trail of destruction as it tumbled down the slope, scattering debris across the pristine snow. He circled the wreckage, noting the absence of any conventional means of propulsion. No tracks for wheels, no harness for animals. A flash of blue caught his eye, partially covered by the driving snow. Not the metallic blue of the vehicle, but something softer. Fabric, perhaps. He moved closer. It was a body, small, wrapped in layers of intricately patterned clothing, now torn and bloodied. The wind had already begun to cover it with a thin shroud of snow. Beside it lay another figure, larger. Adam knelt beside them, brushing away the gathering snow. The larger figure was clearly dead, a female form with skin the color of a summer sky, marred by deep lacerations. Her unseeing eyes were solid black, without iris or pupil, and her features were almost human, but subtly alien. The cheekbones too high, the jaw too angular, the ears small and close to the skull. The smaller figure, a child, stirred weakly as Adam's shadow fell across her face. Her skin was the same azure shade as the adult's, but her features were softer, rounder. Her eyes fluttered open, revealing the same obsidian orbs. She made a soft, pained sound. Adam hesitated only briefly. Whatever these beings were, wherever they had come from, the child was alive and would not remain so for long in the worsening storm. He checked her quickly for obvious injuries, finding only minor cuts and what appeared to be a broken arm. "I'm going to help you," he said, knowing she couldn't understand but hoping his tone would convey his intent. "We need to get out of this storm." The child watched him with those unsettling black eyes, neither resisting nor responding as he carefully wrapped her in his outer fur. She was surprisingly light in his arms, as if her bones were hollow like a bird's. Adam cast one last glance at the dead adult, the child's mother, he presumed, and made a mental note of the location. He would return when the storm passed, if possible, to give her a proper burial. For now, survival took precedence. The journey back to his shelter was arduous. The wind had intensified, driving the temperature down even further. The child in his arms had stopped shivering, a dangerous sign. Adam pushed himself to move faster, ignoring the burning in his lungs and the numbness creeping into his extremities. By the time his shelter came into view, the storm had reached full fury. He stumbled the last few yards, practically falling through the door. Inside, it was cold but blessedly free of wind. Adam carefully set the child on a sleeping pallet, then quickly built up the fire in the small stone hearth. As warmth slowly filled the single-room dwelling, Adam turned his attention back to the child. She was conscious but unresponsive, her obsidian eyes tracking his movements without comprehension or trust. He prepared a broth from the snow hare, adding medicinal herbs he'd gathered during the brief summer months. "You need to drink," he told her, approaching slowly with the wooden bowl. She shrank away from him, a small sound of distress escaping her blue lips. Adam stopped, then deliberately sat on the floor a few feet away, sipping the broth himself to demonstrate it was safe. After a moment's hesitation, the child reached for the bowl. Her movements were stiff from cold and injury, but she managed to drink on her own. The relief on her alien features was unmistakable as the warm liquid spread through her body. "That's it," Adam encouraged. "It will help." As she drank, Adam studied her more carefully. Her clothing was unlike anything he'd seen during his military service, when he'd traveled to most of the known world. The fabric appeared to be woven from something like silk, but with an iridescent quality that caught the firelight. Intricate patterns covered every inch, not merely decorative, he realized, but informational. Some resembled maps or star charts. One pattern in particular caught his attention, a detailed rendering of what appeared to be a mountain range with a path marked through it. At the far side of the mountains, the pattern showed a verdant valley filled with structures that resembled the shattered vehicle he'd found. The child noticed his interest. Setting aside the empty bowl, she pointed to the pattern, then to herself. The gesture was unmistakable. "This is where I'm from. This is home." Adam recognized the mountain range depicted on the garment. The locals called it the Ice Ridge, a massive, supposedly impassable barrier that ran for hundreds of miles. Legend said warmer lands lay beyond it, but no one in living memory had successfully crossed it, especially not during winter weather. "You came from beyond the ridge," Vidi said, more to himself than to her, "and somehow ended up on this side." The child's gaze remained fixed on him, inscrutable yet somehow imploring. She pointed again to the pattern, then toward what Adam knew to be south, toward the ice ridge. "You want to go back," he said, understanding dawning. "You want me to take you home." The storm outside howled in response, as if mocking the very idea. The ice ridge was deadly in summer. In winter, it was suicide. Yet looking at the child, this strange alien being so far from home, Adam felt something stir within him. Something he'd thought long dead after years of war followed by years of exile. Purpose for him. The next morning the storm had passed, leaving behind a crystalline world of blinding white. Adam left the child sleeping and returned to the crash site. The wreckage was now almost completely buried, but he managed to excavate the body of the adult alien. As he prepared a grave in the frozen ground, a laborious process involving fire to thaw the soil, he examined the dead alien more closely. She wore similar clothing to the child, but with additional elements that suggested rank or status. Around her neck was a pendant made of a material he couldn't identify, translucent and shifting with colors like the aurora that sometimes danced across the night sky. Adam removed the pendant, thinking the child might want this memento of her mother. As he did, he noticed marks around the alien's wrists and ankles, unmistakable signs of restraints. These weren't fresh, they were scarred over, suggesting long-term bondage. His jaw tightened. He recognized those marks. He'd seen similar ones on slaves in the southern kingdoms. This alien and her child hadn't simply crashed. They'd been escaping. After burying the mother, Adam searched the wreckage more thoroughly. He found little of use. Most of the technology was shattered beyond recognition. But he did recover a small blade made of an incredibly hard crystalline material. It was perfectly balanced and sharper than any steel he'd ever encountered. When he returned to the shelter, the child was awake. She stood by the window, staring south toward the distant, cloud-shrouded peaks of the ice ridge. She turned as he entered, her expression unreadable, but her posture conveying a desperate hope. "Your mother," Adam said, holding out the pendant. "I buried her properly. She won't be disturbed." The child took the pendant, clutching it to her chest. A sound emerged from her throat, a keening note that raised the hair on Adam's neck. It wasn't quite singing, wasn't quite speech, but it carried an unmistakable weight of grief. After a moment, she composed herself and pointed again to the map on her clothing, then to the window toward the ice ridge. Adam sat heavily on a single chair. "It's impossible," he said. "No one crosses the ridge in winter. We'd both die." The child tilted her head, studying him with those bottomless black eyes. Then deliberately, she pulled back her sleeve, revealing scars identical to her mother's, the marks of shackles and chains. The message couldn't have been clearer. Death is preferable to returning to slavery. Adam recognized the sentiment all too well. Hadn't he made a similar choice when he defied Commander Corvon's order to massacre the villagers? That act of defiance had cost him everything: his rank, his homeland, his future, and earned him this exile. But he'd kept his humanity. He looked at the child, this alien being with her blue skin and black eyes, and saw a reflection of himself, a survivor, a refugee, someone who had suffered and escaped and now sought only to return home. "We'll need supplies," he said finally. "A lot of them, and I'll have to build proper equipment for the journey. It will take at least a week to prepare." The child's expression didn't change, but she nodded once decisively. Then she moved to the small table where Adam kept his meager supply of tools and began sorting them with surprising competence, clearly intending to help. Adam watched her for a moment, wondering if he'd lost his mind. Then he joined her at the table. If they were going to attempt the impossible, they might as well get started. The week stretched into 2 as Adam prepared for their journey. He constructed snowshoes for himself and the child, built a sturdy sled to carry their supplies, and prepared preserved rations that would sustain them for a month, longer, if they could successfully hunt along the way. The child proved to be both intelligent and resourceful. Though she couldn't speak, or at least couldn't speak in any way Adam could understand, she communicated through gestures and drawings. She seemed to have an innate understanding of which local plants were safe to eat and which had medicinal properties, so substantially improving their food stores. Her broken arm healed with surprising speed. Within days, she was using it normally, though Adam insisted on maintaining the splint for additional support. Her recuperative abilities fascinated him, another difference between her species and his own. As they worked, Adam found himself talking more than he had in years. He told her about his former life as a soldier, about Commander Corvon's cruelty, about his exile. He had no idea how much she understood, but it felt good to speak the words aloud after so long in solitude. "I was Corvon's most trusted captain," he explained as he sharpened his hunting knife one evening, "until he ordered me to burn a village that had refused to pay his protection taxes. Women, children, elders, he wanted them all dead as an example." The child watched him intently, her black eyes reflecting the firelight. "I refused. Then I drew my sword against him when he tried to do it himself." Adam tested the knife's edge with his thumb. "I should have killed him when I had the chance. Instead, I hesitated, and his guards overpowered me." He sheathed the knife with a sharp motion. The official sentence was death, but Corvon thought this would be worse, sending me to the northern wasteland with minimal supplies, exile and slow starvation. A grim smile crossed his face. "I've survived 3 years just to spite him." The child placed her small blue hand on his arm, a gesture of understanding or perhaps solidarity. Adam was surprised by how warm her touch was. Her species seemed to run at a higher temperature than humans despite their seemingly cold coloration. "What about you?" he asked. "Were you born into slavery, or were you captured?" The child hesitated, then moved to the hearth and used a stick to draw in the ash. Her drawings were crude but effective, figures with blue skin working in what appeared to be mines or quarries, overseen by figures that resembled humans, but with exaggerated, almost monstrous features. "Slavers took your people," Adam interpreted. "Humans?" The child shook her head, then added details to the overseers. Elongated limbs, too many fingers, faces that were decidedly not human. "Another species then," Adam said, "but not from your world." The child nodded, then drew what appeared to be a ship, not unlike the wrecked cart but much larger, descending from the sky. She pointed to herself, then to the ship, then made a cutting motion across her wrists where the scars were. "They came in ships and took you as slaves," Adam said softly, "and somehow you and your mother escaped in one of their vehicles." Another nod. The child added to her drawing, a small figure piloting the cart ship, a larger figure in the back, seeming to fight off pursuers. "Your mother stole the ship," Adam realized. "She got you away, but they damaged your vessel. You crashed here." The child's expression remained neutral, but her hand trembled slightly as she wiped away the drawings. She returned to Adam's side and pointed to the map on her clothing, then to the sky, making a sweeping gesture that encompassed the stars. "Your people will protect you from these slavers," Adam guessed, "if we can get you home." The child nodded emphatically, then mimicked fighting motions, suggesting her people were not defenseless. "Then we'd better make sure we get you there," Adam said, standing up. Let's finish our preparations. We leave at dawn. They set out 2 days later under clear skies, the temperature hovering just below freezing, unusually mild for this time of year. Adam took it as a good omen. The child rode on the sled as he pulled it, conserving her strength for when they would reach the more treacherous terrain of the ice ridge. The first 3 days of travel were relatively easy, following the winding valley floor toward the distant mountains. The snow was firmly packed, making for smooth progress, and they encountered no threats beyond the occasional curious snow fox. Adam used the time to teach the child some basic words: water, food, danger, stop, which she repeated in a musical accent, her voice high and clear. She seemed to grasp language quickly, though her vocal apparatus struggled with certain sounds. In return, she attempted to teach him her own language, which consisted of both verbal elements and subtle shifts in the coloration of her skin. Adam could manage the verbal components with practice, but the color changes were obviously beyond his biological capabilities, a fact that seemed to amuse the child greatly. They developed a name system of sorts. She called him Adam, pronouncing it as two distinct syllables with a musical lilt. He called her Lee, a simplified approximation of the sound she made when referring to herself, accompanied by a slight blue-to-purple flush along her neck. On the fourth day, the weather shifted. Clouds rolled in from the north, dark and heavy with the promise of snow. The temperature dropped precipitously, and the wind picked up, carrying the bite of true winter. "We need shelter," Adam told Lee, scanning the landscape. "The storm will hit before nightfall." Lee pointed to a dark shape perhaps half a mile ahead, a stand of evergreens clustered against a rocky hillside. Adam nodded and increased his pace, muscles burning with the effort of pulling the laden sled through snow that was growing deeper by the hour. They reached the trees just as the first heavy snowflakes began to fall. Adam quickly constructed a lean-to using branches and his oilcloth tarp, creating a sheltered space just large enough for them and their essential supplies. The rest would have to weather the storm as best it could beneath the tarp covering the sled. As darkness fell, the storm intensified. Wind howled through the trees, driving snow into every crevice despite their shelter. Adam built a small fire carefully positioned to reflect heat into their lean-to, without risking the flames spreading to the evergreen boughs overhead. Lee huddled close to him, her natural warmth a welcome addition to the fire's heat. They shared strips of dried meat and sips of hot tea made from pine needles and stored herbs. "We'll wait it out," and Adam told her. "One day, maybe two. Then we continue." Lee nodded, her expression solemn. She touched the pendant she wore, her mother's pendant, then pointed to the sky, visible in fragments through the shelter's opening, a question in the gesture. "Wondering if she's up there somewhere?" Adam asked. "Watching over you?" Lee nodded again. "I don't know," Adam admitted. "My people have different beliefs about what happens after death. Some say we go to a paradise realm, others that we're reborn, others that we simply end." He stoked the fire thoughtfully. "But I like to think that those who loved us remain connected to us somehow, even after they're gone." Lee seemed to consider this, her head tilted in that peculiar way of hers. Then she reached out and took Adam's hand, placing it against the pendant. The material was warm to the touch and seemed to pulse with a subtle rhythm, almost like a heartbeat. Adam's eyes widened. "Is that—" Before he could finish his question, a sound cut through the howling of the wind, a deep, rumbling growl that raised the hair on the back of his neck. Lee froze, her skin shifting to a paler shade of blue. Adam reached for his knife, his gaze fixed on the darkness beyond their small circle of firelight. "Stay behind me," he whispered. The growl came again, closer this time, accompanied by the soft crunch of massive paws on snow. A shape materialized from the darkness, a snow leopard, but unlike any Adam had seen before. It was enormous, easily twice the size of the largest specimens he'd encountered, and its fur was a strange blue-white that almost glowed in the dim light. Its eyes were fixed on them, pupils vertical slits and pools of amber. It paced at the edge of the firelight, muscles rippling beneath its thick coat. "Don't move," Adam breathed, slowly shifting his position to place himself more fully between the predator and Lee. The beast snarled, revealing teeth like daggers. It took a step forward, testing, Assessing, Adam gripped his knife tighter, knowing it would be little defense against such a creature. His bow was in the sled, out of reach. His mind raced, calculating options, finding few. Suddenly, Lee moved. Before Adam could stop her, she stepped around him and faced the leopard directly. A sound emerged from her throat. Not speech, but a complex series of tones that resonated in the cold air. The leopard froze, its snarl fading to a confused rumble. It tilted its head, ears swiveling forward. Lee continued her strange vocalization, her skin shifting through subtle shades of blue. She took a small step forward, hand extended, palm down, a non-threatening gesture. "Lee, don't," Adam warned. But she ignored him, taking another step toward the massive predator. The leopard's tail twitched, but it made no move to attack. Instead, it lowered its head slightly, continuing to watch Lee with those unblinking amber eyes. Lee's song, there was no other word for it, changed in pitch and rhythm. The leopard responded with a chuffing sound, almost like a large house cat. Then, incredibly, it sat on its haunches, no longer in a predatory posture. Adam watched in astonishment as Lee slowly approached the beast until she stood directly before it. She reached out, hesitated, then gently touched the leopard's massive head between its ears. The leopard closed its eyes and leaned into her touch. "How?" Adam whispered, afraid to break whatever spell she had cast. Lee turned to him, her expression serene despite the tension of the moment. She pointed to the leopard, then to the stars visible through breaks in the storm clouds, then to herself. "You're connected somehow," Adam guessed. "Your people and these creatures?" Lee nodded, stroking the leopard's head. It rumbled a sound that might have been contentment. "Are they from your world? Did they come here with your people?" Lee shook her head, then mimicked the movement of the slavers' ships she had drawn earlier. "The slavers brought them?" Adam frowned. "As what? Hunters? Guards?" Lee nodded at the second guess, then made a motion suggesting escape, similar to what she'd used when describing her and her mother's flight. "They escaped too," Adam realized. "Like you. And they've adapted to this world." The leopard rose suddenly, moving past Lee to approach Adam. He held perfectly still, knife forgotten in his hand, as the massive predator sniffed him thoroughly. Its breath was hot against his face, its amber eyes intelligent and assessing. After a tense moment, the leopard made a decisive sound and turned away, padding back to the edge of the firelight. It looked back once at Lee, who nodded as if in understanding. Then it melted into the darkness as silently as it had appeared. "What just happened?" Adam asked, releasing a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. Lee returned to the fire, her expression thoughtful. She pointed in the direction the leopard had gone, then along their planned route toward the ice ridge. "It's going to help us?" Adam guessed. Lee shrugged, a very human gesture she must have learned from him. She didn't seem certain, but neither did she seem concerned anymore about the predator's presence. Adam shook his head in wonder. "You're full of surprises, Lee." She smiled at him, the first true smile he'd seen from her, and the sight warmed him more than the fire. The storm lasted through the night and into the following day. They remained in their shelter, conserving energy and supplies. The leopard did not return, but twice Adam caught glimpses of its blue-white form patrolling the perimeter of their camp, as if standing guard. By the second morning, the storm had passed, leaving behind 3 feet of fresh snow and a landscape transformed. They set out again, Adam breaking trail while Lee walked behind him, following in his footsteps. The sled was heavier now, laden with snow despite the tarp, and progress was painfully slow. As the day wore on, the terrain began to rise. They were approaching the foothills of the ice ridge. In the clear air, Adam could see the mountains looming ahead, their peaks dazzling white against the blue sky. They were magnificent and terrifying, sheer faces of rock and ice, sawtooth ridges, deep crevasses filled with ancient glaciers. "That's our path," Adam said, pointing to a narrow pass between 2 of the less formidable peaks. "If your map is accurate, that's the most direct route through." Lee studied the mountains, her expression unreadable. Then she pointed to their left, toward a different, seemingly more difficult passage. Adam frowned. "That way looks worse. Steeper. More exposed." Lee shook her head firmly, pointing again to the left-hand route. She traced a pattern in the air that resembled flowing water, then made a cracking motion with her hands. There's a danger in the direct route, Adam guessed. Water? Ice? Lee nodded emphatically at the last suggestion. Unstable ice, Adam translated. Avalanche risk? Another nod. Adam studied the mountains again, reassessing. The route Lee suggested would be more physically demanding, but might indeed be safer from avalanches. The direct route passed beneath several massive snowfields that, now that he looked more carefully, did appear precariously balanced. Your way then, he decided, but it will take longer and be harder on both of us. Lee's expression remained resolute. She pointed to herself, then mimicked, walking strongly, as if to say she could handle it. All right, tough one, Adam said with a small smile. Your way it is. They made camp that night at the base of the foothills. As darkness fell, the temperature dropped severely, the cold taking on a crystalline quality that burned the lungs with each breath. Adam built their shelter with extra care, using snow blocks to create a windbreak around their small tent. As they ate their evening meal, a familiar growl announced the return of the blue-white leopard. It emerged from the darkness carrying the freshly killed mountain goat in its massive jaws. The predator dropped its offering at the edge of their camp, then retreated a short distance to watch them with those intelligent amber eyes. I think it's trying to help, Adam said, amazed. Lee nodded, unsurprised. She approached the dead goat cautiously, examining it, then looked back at Adam with a nod of approval. Fresh meat will help one conserve our supplies, Adam acknowledged. He approached the carcass, nodding respectfully to the leopard as he did. Thank you, he said to the beast, feeling only slightly foolish for addressing it directly. The leopard rumbled what might have been acknowledgement, then settled onto its haunches to watch as Adam dressed the goat with practiced efficiency. He shared some of the choicest portions with their unexpected ally, which accepted the offering with surprising delicacy. That night, the leopard slept at the edge of their camp, a silent sentinel against the dangers of the wilderness. Adam found its presence oddly comforting, though he kept his knife close at hand nonetheless. Trust had its limits, especially in the wild. The next morning brought clear skies but bitter cold. They set out early, following Lee's chosen route into the mountains. The terrain grew steadily more challenging, steep inclines, narrow ledges, fields of boulders partially concealed by snow. The leopard accompanied them, sometimes scouting ahead, sometimes following behind, its massive paws finding purchase where Adam struggled. By midday, they had ascended high enough to look back over the landscape they'd traversed. The northern plains stretched out like a white sea, Adam's tiny cabin invisible at this distance. Ahead, the mountains rose ever higher, their peaks shrouded in thin clouds. We're making good progress, Adam told Lee, though his body ached with the effort of pulling the sled up the increasingly steep slopes. Another week, maybe less, and we'll reach the pass. Lee nodded, her breath forming crystalline clouds in the frigid air. She had wrapped herself in layers of furs despite her natural tolerance for cold, and her blue skin had taken on a slightly purplish tinge that Adam hoped was normal for her species. They continued their ascent through the afternoon, the path growing treacherous as they climbed. Twice they had to backtrack when their route ended in impassable cliffs. The leopard proved invaluable, often finding the alternative paths that Adam might have missed. As dusk approached, they reached a relatively flat area, a small plateau nestled between rising slopes. Adam decided it would serve as their campsite for the night. As he began to set up their shelter, Lee suddenly stiffened, her head tilting in that peculiar way that indicated she was listening to something beyond human perception. The leopard growled, a low, warning sound. It faced the way they had come, ears flattened against its skull. "What is it?" Adam asked, hand moving to his knife. Lee made the sign they had established for danger, then pointed down the mountain the way they had come. She held up 3 fingers, then mimicked something large walking. 3 large somethings coming up behind us, Adam translated. He grabbed his bow from the sled and quickly strung it, then checked his quiver of arrows. "Get in the shelter. I'll see what we're dealing with." Lee shook her head firmly. She pointed to herself, then to the leopard, then made a circular motion encompassing their camp, suggesting they should defend it together. Before Adam could argue, the leopard bounded a short distance down the slope, disappearing among the rocks. Moments later, a challenging roar echoed through the mountains, followed by answering roars that sent shivers down Adam's spine. "More leopards," he said, But are they friendly like yours? Lee's expression suggested she didn't know. She picked up a sturdy branch they'd collected for firewood, testing its weight as a potential weapon. Adam nocked an arrow, his gaze fixed on the slope below. The light was fading quickly, shadows stretching across the snow. Movement caught his eye, three massive shapes making their way up the incline. They resembled their leopard ally in size and general form, but their fur was darker, a deep blue rather than the blue-white of their companion. They don't look friendly, Adam murmured. The three newcomers spread out as they approached, classic hunting behavior. Their amber eyes gleamed in the dying light, fixed on Adam and Lee with predatory focus. Suddenly, a streak of blue-white exploded from behind a boulder, their leopard ally launching an attack on the intruders. It collided with the lead predator, and the two massive cats rolled in the snow, a tangle of claws and fangs and rumbling growls. The other two dark leopards continued their advance, undeterred by their packmates' battle. Adam drew his bow, aiming carefully in the fading light. "Stay behind me," he told Lee, though he knew she was unlikely to obey. He released his arrow, and it struck true, burying itself in the shoulder of the leftmost attacker. The beast roared in pain and anger, but didn't slow its approach. If anything, it moved faster, covering ground with alarming speed. Adam barely had time to knock another arrow before the wounded leopard leaped. He fired point blank, the arrow taking the beast in the chest. The impact diverted its leap just enough that instead of landing directly on Adam, it crashed into the snow beside him, thrashing in its death throes. The third leopard circled to the right, seeking to flank them. Lee stood her ground, brandishing her makeshift staff. The predator snarled, muscles bunching as it prepared to pounce. Adam dropped his bow and drew his knife, knowing it would be little defense against such a creature. "Lee, run!" Instead, Lee made the same strange vocalization she had used with their leopard ally, that complex series of tones that had seemed to establish a connection. The attacking leopard hesitated, ears twitching. For a moment, Adam thought it might work again. Then the beast snarled and lunged. Lee swung her staff with surprising strength, catching the leopard across the muzzle. It yowled in pain, but continued its attack, massive paws swinging at Lee's small form. Adam didn't think. He moved, throwing himself between Lee and the slashing claws. Pain exploded across his chest as the leopard's razor-sharp claws tore through his furs and into the flesh beneath. He grunted with the impact but managed to drive his knife upward, burying it to the hilt in the leopard's throat. Hot blood gushed over his hand as the beast convulsed. Its weight crushed him against the snow, the breath driven from his lungs. Adam struggled to push the dying animal off, his strength fading as blood, his own and the leopard's, stained the snow crimson. Suddenly the weight lifted. Their leopard ally had returned and was dragging the dying attacker away, its own fur matted with blood from its own battle. Adam tried to rise but fell back, his vision swimming. He was vaguely aware of Lee kneeling beside him, her small hands tearing open his furs to assess the damage. The pain was distant now, a worrying sign. Adam knew he was going into shock. "Check. The other one," he managed to say. "Make sure it's dead." Lee ignored him, her focus entirely on his wounds. She rummaged through their supplies, returning with the medical kit they had prepared. Her small blue hands moved with surprising competence as she cleaned the deep gashes and applied pressure to stem the bleeding. Their leopard ally approached, limping but apparently victorious. It sniffed Adam's wounds, making a low sound in its throat that might have been concern. Then it settled beside them, its body heat providing welcome warmth as shock made Adam shiver uncontrollably. Lee worked it quickly, applying herbal poultices to the wounds before binding them tightly with clean cloth. The bleeding slowed but didn't stop entirely. Adam knew he needed rest, warmth, and time to heal. Luxuries they couldn't afford in their exposed position. "We need shelter," he gasped. "Can't stay in the open." Lee nodded, her expression grave. She pointed to a cluster of rocks nearby that might provide some protection from the wind and potential predators. With the leopard's help, the beast allowing Lee to direct it with gentle touches and those musical vocalizations, they managed to move Adam to the relative safety of the rocks. Lee quickly set up their tent around him, then built a small fire. The leopard dragged the carcasses of the attackers a safe distance away. then returned to stand guard at the entrance to their improvised camp. As night fell fully, Adam drifted in and out of consciousness. The pain was a constant companion now, sharp and insistent. Fever set in despite Liai's best efforts with their medicinal herbs. Through the haze of pain and rising heat, Adam was aware of Lee's constant presence. Her cool hands on his forehead, her soft voice singing in that strange musical language of hers. At some point, he felt something cool and viscous being applied to his wounds. Not the herbal poultices they had prepared, but something else. He forced his eyes open to see Lee using a bluish substance that seemed to glow faintly in the dim light. "What?" he managed to ask. Lee held up her mother's pendant. The translucent material had been partially scraped away, revealing the glowing blue substance within. She pointed to his wounds, then made a motion like something healing. Closing. "Medicine from your world," Adam understood. She was using whatever was inside the pendant, perhaps the equivalent of the emergency medical supplies her people carried. The effect was almost immediate. The burning pain in his chest subsided to a dull ache, and the fever that had been building broke like a wave receding from shore. Strength flowed back into his limbs, not completely, but enough that he could sit up without assistance. "Thank you," he said, genuinely awed by the effectiveness of the alien medicine. Lee smiled, though her expression remained worried. She pointed to the pendant, now half empty, then to his chest, then held up 2 fingers. "It will last for 2 more treatments," Adam guessed. "Then it's gone," she nodded. "We'll be careful with it then," Adam promised. "Save it for emergencies." He took stock of their situation. They had lost 1 day, possibly 2, to his injury. Their supplies remained adequate, but the attack had destroyed some of their equipment, including one of their water skins and part of their shelter. The leopards they had killed provided fresh meat and potentially useful fur, but processing the carcasses would take time they couldn't spare. "We need to move on tomorrow," he decided. "I can travel, just more slowly." Lee shook her head firmly, pointing to him and then mimicking sleep. "We can't afford to wait," Adam argued. "The weather could turn again at any moment. And if there are more of those hunting leopard out there..." Their leopard ally rumbled from its position at the entrance to their shelter, as if offering its opinion on the matter. Lee stroked its massive head gratefully, then turned back to Adam with a resolute expression. She pointed to herself, then to the snow outside, making walking motions with her fingers. "You want to scout ahead?" Adam frowned. "Alone? That's too dangerous." Lee shook her head, then pointed to the leopard beside her. "Not alone, with protection." Adam wanted to refuse, but he recognized the logic. They needed to know what lay ahead, and he was in no condition to scout effectively. Lee was small, light, and could move quickly through the snow, especially with the leopard breaking trail for her. "Just reconnaissance," he said firmly. "You go to the next ridge, look at what's beyond, and come straight back. No more than 2 hours." Lee nodded, her expression serious. She gathered a few essentials into a small pack. Water, dried meat, a small knife Adam had given her. The leopard seemed to understand the plan, rising and stretching as Lee prepared. "Be careful," Adam said as she prepared to leave. "The path gets steeper beyond those rocks. Watch for loose snow." Lee touched his hand briefly, a gesture of reassurance, then slipped out of the shelter with the leopard at her side. Adam watched them go, anxiety gnawing at him, despite his trust in both Lee's capabilities and the leopard's protective instincts. Left alone, Adam carefully examined his wounds. The gashes were deep but clean, and the alien medicine had already accelerated the healing process remarkably. The edges of the wounds had sealed, though the deeper tissue would take longer to mend. He rebandaged them carefully, using their dwindling supply of clean cloth. He then turned his attention to repairing what equipment he could and preparing a meal from the leopard meat. The activity helped distract him from worrying about Lee, though he found himself pausing frequently to scan the slopes for any sign of her return. 2 hours passed, then 3. Anxiety turned to genuine concern. Adam forced himself to his feet, ignoring the pain that flared across his chest with the movement. He needed to go after her. He had just finished strapping on his snowshoes when a flash of blue caught his eye. Lee running down the slope with a speed that suggested urgency rather than caution. The leopard was nowhere in sight. Adam grabbed his bow, scanning the terrain behind her for pursuit. Nothing visible, but Lee's haste suggested danger. She burst into the shelter, breathing hard, her blue skin flushed to a deeper shade with exertion. Her hands moved rapidly, pointing to the direction she had come from, then making a crumbling motion. Avalanche? Adam guessed. Lee shook her head, then mimicked the ground splitting open. A crevasse? The ice is breaking? She nodded emphatically, then pointed to their leopard ally, making a falling motion followed by a trapped gesture. The leopard fell into a crevasse, Adam translated. It's trapped. Another nod, even more vigorous. Lee tugged at his arm, clearly wanting him to come immediately. Adam hesitated. The leopard had been a valuable ally, but risking their lives for it seemed foolhardy, especially with his injuries. Yet he couldn't dismiss the genuine distress in Lee's expression, nor the debt they owed the creature for its protection. Show me, he decided, gathering rope and his climbing spikes. Lee led him up the slope at a pace that taxed his injured body. The path grew steeper, the snow deeper and less stable. In places, they had to use their hands to scramble up rocky sections where the snow had blown clear. After nearly an hour of difficult climbing, they reached a relatively flat expanse, a snowfield stretching between rocky outcroppings. Near the center, a dark line marred the pristine white, a crevasse that hadn't been visible beneath the snow until something heavy had broken through. Approaching cautiously, Adam could hear rumbling growls echoing up from the darkness. Their leopard ally, still alive but clearly distressed. He lay flat on his stomach and crawled to the edge, peering down into the gloom. The crevasse was about 15 feet deep, its walls sheer ice. At the bottom, the leopard paced in the limited space, looking up at them with those intelligent amber eyes. One of its legs was held at an awkward angle, broken or badly sprained. We'll need to lower someone down with the rope, Adam said, assessing the situation. The walls are too slick for it to climb out on its own, especially injured. Lee immediately began securing the rope around her small body, clearly volunteering. Adam shook his head. You're not strong enough to control it if it panics. He gestured to his own larger frame. It needs to be me. Lee's expression suggested doubt, reasonable given his injuries, but she reluctantly agreed. They drove Adam's ice axe deep into the frozen ground as an anchor point, and Lee demonstrated surprising skill with knots as they prepared the rescue. If anything goes wrong, if the leopard turns aggressive or the ice starts to give way more, you cut the rope and run, Adam instructed. Understand? Don't try to pull me up. Just get yourself to safety. Lee nodded, though her expression suggested she had no intention of abandoning him. Adam began his descent, carefully controlling his speed as Lee managed the rope from above. The walls of the crevasse were solid ice, sculpted by wind and time into otherworldly patterns. In different circumstances, he might have found the blue-white formations beautiful. The leopard watched his descent warily, rumbling deep in its chest. Adam spoke softly as he lowered himself, using the same calm tone he might use with a nervous horse. Easy now, we're here to help. Just stay calm. Whether it understood his words or merely his tone, the leopard remained relatively still as Adam reached the bottom of the crevasse. Its injured leg was indeed broken, the bone visible beneath the blue-white fur. The beast must have been in considerable pain, yet it had waited patiently for help rather than lashing out. This isn't going to be pleasant for either of us, Adam warned it, slowly approaching, but we need to get you out of here. The leopard watched him with those unblinking amber eyes, then deliberately lay down, presenting its injured leg to him. The action was so understanding, so trusting, that Adam was momentarily taken aback. You really do understand, don't you? He murmured, kneeling beside the massive creature. Working quickly but carefully, he created a splint using pieces of wood from their supplies and strips torn from his own undershirt. The leopard remained still throughout the process, though low growls of pain escaped it when Adam had to manipulate the broken bone. Once the leg was stabilized, Adam fashioned a harness from the rope, designed to support the leopard's weight without putting pressure on the injury. This was the truly dangerous part. The leopard would need to cooperate fully, and even then, its weight would make the ascent difficult. Lee, Adam called up, we're ready. Remember what I taught you about the pulley system? When I give the signal, start pulling. Lee's face appeared at the edge of the crevasse, her expression determined. She gave a thumbs up, another human gesture she had adopted. Adam turned to the leopard. "This will hurt," he warned it, "but you need to stay calm. No thrashing, no fighting the rope." As if understanding perfectly, the leopard rumbled a response that might have been agreement. Adam finished securing the harness, then gave Lee the signal to begin hoisting. The rope went taut, and the leopard was slowly lifted from the ground. It hung suspended, the makeshift harness distributing its considerable weight as evenly as possible. A pained growl escaped it as the movement jostled its broken leg, but it remained otherwise still, allowing itself to be raised foot by foot toward the surface. Adam followed, using his climbing spikes to gain purchase on the ice walls. The exertion reopened his wounds, warm blood seeping through his bandages, but he ignored the pain, focused entirely on the task at hand. The leopard reached the edge first. Lee struggled with the final lift, her small frame straining against the beast's weight. Adam climbed faster, reaching the lip of the crevasse just as her strength began to give out. With a final surge of effort, he heaved himself over the edge, then helped Lee pull the leopard to safety. The three of them collapsed in the snow, exhausted but successful. The leopard lay panting, its injured leg held carefully off the ground. It regarded them with what appeared to be gratitude in those amber eyes, then slowly, painfully, rose to a three-legged stance. "You need to rest," Adam told it, though he knew the advice was likely futile. Wild creatures didn't have the luxury of convalescence. To his surprise, the leopard limped over to them and deliberately lay down again, this time positioning itself against Adam's side, its massive body providing warmth and shelter from the rising wind. Lee smiled, a genuine, full smile that transformed her alien features, and settled against the leopard's other flank. The three of them formed an unlikely circle of warmth and mutual protection in the vast, cold wilderness of the mountains. They remained there through the night, sharing body heat and vigilance. By morning, Adam's wounds had begun to throb again, and the leopard's splinted leg was clearly causing it significant pain. Yet both understood, without words, that they needed to continue their journey. The mountains were unforgiving, and to linger was to risk death. With Lee's help, Adam adjusted the sled to create a platform where the leopard could ride, taking weight off its injured leg. The beast seemed to understand the purpose and carefully positioned itself on the makeshift transport. The arrangement added significant weight to their burden, but Adam refused to abandon the creature that had repeatedly risked its life for them. They set out again, following Lee's chosen route. Progress was painfully slow, the added weight of the leopard making each step a struggle. Yet they persevered, climbing steadily higher into the mountains. Days blurred together in a haze of exertion, pain, and determination. Adam's wounds gradually healed, aided by occasional applications of the alien medicine from Lee's pendant. The leopard's leg began to mend as well, though more slowly. By the fifth day after the rescue, it was able to walk for short periods, relieving Adam of its weight for blessed intervals. The weather held, a stroke of luck that Adam knew couldn't last forever. The higher they climbed, the colder it became, the air thinning noticeably. Breathing became labored, and they were forced to take frequent rests. Finally, after what seemed an eternity of struggle, they reached what appeared to be the highest point of their route, a narrow pass between towering peaks. From this vantage point, they could see both the way they had come and the terrain that lay ahead. Behind them stretched the vast white expanse of the northern plains. Ahead, partially obscured by thin clouds, lay a dramatic change in landscape. The southern slopes of the ice ridge fell away more steeply than the northern side, and beyond them, a verdant valley, green and vibrant even in winter, protected from the harsh northern winds by the mountain range they had just traversed. "The warm lands," Adam breathed, scarcely believing his eyes. "You were right, Lee. It exists." Lee's expression was one of pure joy. She pointed excitedly to specific features in the valley below, clusters of structures that must be settlements, winding waterways, what appeared to be cultivated fields despite the season. "Home," the leopard rumbled beside them, its amber gaze fixed on the valley as well, as if it too recognized the significance of what they were seeing. "We'll rest here tonight," Adam decided. "Tomorrow, we begin the descent." They made camp in the shelter of a rocky overhang, protected from the worst of the wind. As they shared a meal of the last of their dried meat, Adam found himself studying Lee with a mixture of pride and preemptive loss. Soon she would be reunited with her people, and his role in her story would end. The thought was unexpectedly painful. In the weeks of their journey, he had grown deeply attached to this strange, resilient child with her blue skin and bottomless black eyes. She had shown courage, intelligence, and compassion beyond her years. She had, in many ways, saved him as much as he had saved her, not just physically, but from the bitter isolation and purposelessness of his exile. "I'll miss you," he told her simply. Lee looked at him in surprise, then shook her head firmly. She pointed to him, then to the valley, then to herself, making a staying together motion with her hands. "You want me to come with you?" Adam asked. "To live among your people?" She nodded emphatically, her expression earnest. Adam sighed. "It's not that simple, Lee. Your people might not welcome a human. I'm not like you." Lee's response was immediate and decisive. She pointed to the leopard, then to Adam, then to herself, drawing a circle that encompassed all three. Different, yet connected. A unit. A family of sorts. "You think they'll accept me because of what we've been through together?" Adam interpreted. "Because I helped bring you home." Lee nodded again, her confidence unwavering. Adam wasn't so sure, but he kept his doubts to himself. There was no point in arguing about a future that had yet to unfold. For now, it was enough that they had reached the pass. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new decisions. They set out at dawn, beginning the descent toward the warm lands. The southern slopes proved both easier and more dangerous than the northern approach. Easier because they were traveling downhill, more dangerous because the snow was less stable, prone to sudden slides and slumps. The leopard moved more confidently now, its injured leg healing well enough to bear partial weight. It often ranged ahead, testing the path for stability before Adam and Lee followed. By midday, they had descended far enough that the air grew noticeably warmer. The snow thinned, revealing patches of actual soil and incredibly occasional hardy plants, not the dormant, frozen vegetation of the north, but actively growing specimens with green leaves and even small, colorful flowers. "How is this possible?" Adam wondered aloud. "It's still winter." Lee pointed to the sky, then to the ground, making a circling motion with her hands. Something about the valley's position, perhaps, or features of the landscape that trapped heat and created a microclimate unlike the surrounding regions. As they descended further, the changes became more pronounced. The snow disappeared entirely, replaced by lush vegetation that grew more abundant with each passing hour. The air was warm, almost humid compared to the crystalline cold of the mountains. Brightly colored birds flitted among the trees, their calls a stark contrast to the oppressive silence of the northern wilderness. They made camp that night in a small clearing, surrounded by towering trees unlike any Adam had seen before. Their bark a deep purple, their leaves a vibrant teal. The leopard seemed as fascinated by the new environment as they were, sniffing curiously at unfamiliar plants and occasionally batting at the luminescent insects that emerged as darkness fell. "We're close now, aren't we?" Adam asked as they shared a meal of fresh fruits Lee had identified as safe to eat. She nodded, pointing to a distant glow visible through the trees, lights from what must be one of the settlements they had seen from the pass. "Tomorrow then," Adam said, a complex mixture of emotions in his voice. "Tomorrow you'll be home." Lee touched his hand, her expression serious. She pointed to him, then to herself, then made the circular motion again. Together. "I hope you're right," Adam said softly. "I truly do." They set out at first light, following a path that became increasingly well-defined as they approached the settlement. The vegetation grew more orderly as well, transitioning from wild growth to what were clearly cultivated areas, fields of plants with broad, fan-shaped leaves and clusters of colorful fruits. Workers moved among these fields, blue-skinned figures similar to Lehi but adult-sized, their movements graceful and purposeful. They wore clothing with the same intricate patterns Adam had noted on Lee's garments, though these seemed to indicate different roles or statuses. One of the workers spotted them approaching and froze, tools dropping from suddenly slack hands. A shout went up, not in fear, Adam noted with relief, but in apparent surprise and excitement. More workers turned, the shout spreading rapidly through the fields. Lee quickened her pace, practically running now. Adam followed more cautiously, the leopard limping along beside him. He noted that the beast seemed nervous, staying close to his side rather than ranging ahead, as had been its habit. As they reached the edge of the fields, a delegation approached from the direction of the settlement, a group of what appeared to be elders or leaders, based on the elaborateness of their clothing and the deference shown by the workers. They moved with deliberate dignity, but their expressions betrayed their shock at the sight of Lee. Lee stopped a respectful distance from the delegation, then made a series of gestures that appeared to be formal greetings. The elders responded with similar emotions, though their attention kept shifting between Lee, Adam, and the leopard. One step forward, a tall figure with elaborately patterned skin that shifted colors as she moved. She spoke, her voice musical in the same way Lee's was, but deeper, more resonant. Lee responded, her hands moving in expressive gestures to supplement her limited vocabulary. She pointed repeatedly to Adam, making motions that suggested rescue, protection, journey. The elder listened intently, then approached Adam directly. She studied him with those bottomless black eyes, her expression unreadable to human sensibilities. Then, to Adam's surprise, she spoke in heavily accented but recognizable human language. You, bring child, home, cross mountains, save from, slavers. Each word seemed difficult for her to form, as if her vocal apparatus wasn't quite designed for human speech. Yes, Adam confirmed, then gestured to include the leopard. We all made the journey together. The elder's skin shifted to a deeper blue, with patterns of lighter color rippling across her face and hands. She turned to address the gathered crowd in her own language. A murmur ran through them, and many moved closer, their expressions ranging from awe to disbelief to deep emotion. The elder turned back to Adam. Child taken, many seasons passed, with mother, all thought dead. She touched her chest in what appeared to be a gesture of profound feeling. You bring miracle. Before Adam could respond, the crowd parted, and a tall, strongly built male rushed forward. His skin bore patterns similar to those Adam had noted on Lee's mother's clothing. He fell to his knees before Lee, his hands trembling as he reached for her. Lee flung herself into his arms with a cry of recognition and joy. The sound that emerged from both of them was that same keening note Adam had heard when Lee mourned her mother, not quite singing, not quite speech, but raw, emotion-given voice. Father, the elder explained simply. Adam watched the reunion, a lump forming in his throat. The depth of emotion was palpable, transcending the differences between their species. In that moment, grief and joy, loss and recovery were universal. After a long embrace, Lee drew back from her father and turned to Adam. She spoke rapidly to the elder, who listened carefully before addressing Adam again. Child says, you are hero. Cross mountains in winter. Fight predators. The elder gestured to his bandaged chest. Risk life. Adam shook his head. We helped each other survive. I couldn't have made it without her, or without our friend here. He placed a hand on the leopard's massive head. The elder's skin rippled with patterns Adam couldn't interpret. She conferred briefly with the other leaders, then turned back to him. You are welcome among Lee Shara. She gestured to encompass their people. Home here, if you wish. Adam blinked in surprise. You would accept me, a human? The elder's expression shifted to what might have been a smile. Long ago, humans and Lee Shara, friends, before slavers came, before war. She gestured to Lee and the leopard. You show true spirit, protect child, heal hunter. The term she used for the leopard suggested respect, recognition of a kindred intelligence rather than merely an animal. Lee's father approached, still holding his daughter's hand. He spoke to Adam through the elders' translation. My child lives because of you. My house is your house. My family is your family. He touched his chest, then Adam's in a formal gesture. Blood debt. Adam was overwhelmed. After years of exile, of believing himself utterly alone in the world, to be offered not just shelter, but belonging was almost incomprehensible. Thank you, he managed. I would be honored. Lee beamed at him, her expression vindicated. She had known somehow that this would be the outcome. She took his hand and her father's, bringing them together in a gesture of connection that needed no translation. The elder spoke again to the gathered crowd, and a cheer went up, a harmonious sound unlike any human celebration, but unmistakable in its joy and welcome. The leopard rumbled beside Adam, seeming to sense the positive turn of events. As the crowd moved forward to escort them to the settlement, Adam gazed back at the towering mountains they had crossed. From this side, the ice ridge looked even more formidable, its peaks gleaming white against the blue sky, a barrier that had kept these two worlds separate for generations. Yet they had crossed it, a small band of outcasts, a human exile, an alien child, and a creature bred for hunting that had chosen protection instead. They had defied the impossible through mutual trust and shared determination. Looking ahead to the settlement, with its graceful structures and the welcoming faces of Lee's people, Adam felt something he had not experienced since before his exile, perhaps not even then. He felt like he was coming home.